Tapos, habang nagtuturo ako noon, syempre dapat basa-basahin ko yun. Binabasa-basa ko na siya. Binabasa-basa ko na siya. Ano ba? Yun. Kunin muna lahat o 2015. Tama ba? Ay. Ito.
As the famous Filipino history buff Carmen Gilarnacto said, Philippine history can be described as 300 years in a convent and 50 years in Hollywood. This nation of 7,000 islands was colonized by the Spaniards for 333 years and by the Americans for almost half a century. Several landmarks across the country remain standing, with their walls, pillars, and grounds echoing stories of the Philippines' tragic and triumphant past. Most of them are only fragments of what they were used to be, but they are undoubtedly windows to the Philippines' soul pre, during, and post-colonization. Aside from breathtaking beaches and awe-inspiring landscapes, here are some of the most notable historical places in the Philippines that are definitely a must-visit. Mactan Shrine, Cebu. The Mactan Shrine in Punta Engaño, Mactan Island, Cebu, Philippines, was where the battle between the Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan and Mactan Island chieftain Lapu-Lapu happened. Tourists visit the place to see the famous site of the Battle of Mactan. Ferdinand Magellan had been successful in bringing the Christianity to the people of Cebu. From there, he also crossed the sea to reach Mactan Island in the hope to spread the Christian faith in the area. But before reaching the shore, Magellan was killed, along with his Christian soldiers, by the Mactan Island chieftain Lapu-Lapu, who led his men armed with spears, swords, and shields for the Battle of Supremacy and Freedom on April 27, 1521. Calle Crisologo, Vigan. The most beautiful street in the Philippines can be found in Vigan, which is Calle Crisologo. It was restored to its pre-war beauty with its cobbled streets and old Spanish houses. It is the only town during World War II that was saved from destructions because of a love story. Legend has it that a Japanese general who married a Filipina in Vigan promised the Paris priest that he would save the town from destruction from the retreating Japanese if he would agree to take care of his family. It is not only a preserved historical street like the ones in Intramuros, but it is full of life, especially during the Festival of the Arts. Corregidor Island, Bataan. Just a few hours away from Manila is Corregidor Island, regarded as one of the Philippines' last military strongholds. During the American occupation, Corregidor was fortified with coastal artillery to defend the entrance of Manila Bay from enemy ships. The American military spent millions defending the strategic location, but its troops were eventually overrun by the sheer number of enemy forces who would soon send the captured U.S. soldiers on the infamous Bataan Death March. But even in all the seemingly hopeless privation and suffering of a POW camp, Jonathan Wainwright, the captured American commander, boldly claimed a victory. A day tour in Corregidor consists of visits to sites such as the Battery Way, Battery Hearn, and the Pacific War Memorial, which was built in honor of all the Filipino and American soldiers who fought during World War II. Rizal Park, Manila. Rizal Park, also known as Luneta Park or simply Luneta, is a historic urban park located in Ermita, Manila, Philippines. It is considered as one of the largest urban parks in Asia, covering an area of 58 hectares. The site on where the park is situated was originally known as Bagong Bayan during the Spanish colonial period. It is adjacent to the historic walled city of Intramuros and it's a major tourist destination in the Philippines. Situated on the eastern shore of Manila Bay, the park plays a significant role in shaping the history of the Philippines. The execution of Filipino patriot Jose Rizal on December 30, 1896 fanned the flames of the 1896 Philippine Revolution against the Kingdom of Spain. The park was officially named in his honor, and the monument enshrining his remains serves as the park's symbolic focal point. Binondo, Manila. Before Spain arrived in the Philippines, Chinese merchants were already trading with Filipinos for decades. As the years went by, the Chinese kept coming back to the Philippines for social and economic exchange. Throughout history, the relationships of the Chinese and the Filipinos continuously strengthened. Some Chinese citizens even moved here to live. The Philippines has different Chinatowns, and as of 2019, Binondo serves as the oldest established Chinatown in the world. Today, it is best enjoyed as a food tour destination in Manila, where you can sample signature fried chicken, fried siopaw, noodle soups, and the most authentic dim sum you can ever find in the entire metro.
Alam niyo ba na si Fernando Morsolo ang nag-drawing ng orihinal na Ginebra San Miguel logo? Sa video na ito ay sasagutin natin ang tanong na, kamusta ba ang naging buhay ni Fernando Morsolo at paano ba nalalaman na siya ang gumawa ng isang artwork? Si Fernando Morsolo ang pinakaunang artist na nanalo ng National Artist Award. Ibinigay ito sa kanya 4 na araw bago siya mamatay, kaya ito ay tinatawag na posthumous award o pagbibigay ng award sa isang tao kahit siya ay wala na. Noong May 30, 1892, pinanganak si Fernando Morsolo sa Calle Heran na Pedro Hill Street ngayon. Ito ay sa Maypaco, Maynila. 7 buwan pa lang siya ay lumipat na sila sa Daet, Camarines Norte kung saan ang kanyang ama ay nagtrabaho bilang isang bookkeeper. Noong siya ay 11 years old, namatay ang kanyang ama. Sila ay bumalik sa Maynila kung saan ang kanyang ina ay binuhay sila sa pamamagitan ng pagbubutla. At 13 years old, tumulong si Morsolo sa kanilang kabuhayan at isa na rito ang pagiging apprentice niya sa kanyang tito, Fabian de la Rosa, na isang pintor. Ginamit na Morsolo ang kanyang talent sa pagdodrawing na nakatulong sa pagtustos niya sa pag-aaral. Nagtapos siya sa University of the Philippines School of Fine Arts. Nagkaroon si Morsolo ng iba't ibang trabaho tulad ng draftsman, artist, at part-time tutor sa University of the Philippines. At eventually, naging dean na rin siya ng School of Fine Arts kung saan din siya nag-aral. Alam niyo ba na dahil sa galing ni Morsolo ay nabigyan siya ng scholarship ni Enrique Zobel de Ayala para makapag-aral sa Real Academia de Bellas Artes, Madrid sa Spain, kung saan doon din nag-aral si Juan Luna. Ngayon, paano ba nalalaman na ang painting ay gawa ni Fernando Amorsolo? Maraming paraan, pero dito sa video na ito ay titignan natin ang tatlong paraan. Una, conservative. Pangalawa, chiaroscuro. Pangatlo, subject matter. Number 1, conservative. Kilala si Fernando Amorsolo sa kanyang conservative style of painting o parang realistic at may sinusunod na standards. Ang painting na nakikita nyo ay palay maiden. May kita na ang detalye ng painting ay parang totoo. Halos mukha itong picture kung saan ang itsura ng babae, ang palay, liwanag at ang background ay parang hango sa totoong buhay. Physically, ang painting ay mukhang realistic, pero ang konsepto nito ay hindi or idealistic. Idealistic ang painting na ito dahil mukha itong perpekto. Tignan mo ang kamay, pati yung mukha ng babae. Kung totoo siya ay nasa ilalim ng araw sa may palayan, siya ay dapat pinagpapawisan o kaya may konting putik man lang, pero mukha siyang nag-pose lang at pinahawakan ng palay. Number 2. Chiaroscuro. Ang chiaro ay clear or bright at oscuro ay dark or obscure. Kilala ang chiaroscuro technique sa West mula 17th century kung saan ang dilim at liwanag ay nag-aagaw. Pero nai-apply ito ni Amorsolo na may tatak Pinoy. Sa painting na ito ay may kita ang chiaroscuro technique sa isang eksena na pamilyar sa ating mga Pilipino. Sa ilalim ng puno, may isang grupo ng mga babaeng kasama ang inani nilang mangga. Makita natin na ang malinaw na pagkakaiba ng liwanag at dilim mula sa likod ng painting kung saan maliwanag at sa harapan ng puno na medyo madilim. Dahil sa paggamit ng light at shadow, nakita natin na ang painting ay may lilim at lalim. Now, let's play a game. Kumuha ng kahit anong papel at tupiin sa gitna. Mag-drawing ng isang mangga sa left. Tapos, mag-drawing ng isa pang mangga sa kanan. Subukan na maging magkamukha ito. Ang hirap, no? Si Amorsolo ay kaya mag-drawing ng paulit-ulit na halos magkamukha kahit ano pa yan. Balik na tayo sa number 3, subjects. Sa husay ni Amorsolo ay kaya niya mag-paint ng kahit ano. Landscape, portrait, o historical painting. Ang mga unang gawa niya ay landscape na pinapakita ang ganda ng Pilipinas. Majority ng kanyang painting ay maaraw at bihira ang painting na maulan. Favorite niya i-paint ang mga eksena sa Manila tulad ng Intramuros. Kilala din siya ng mga businessmen at prominenteng tao para sa kanyang portrait paintings. Nang dumating ang mga Hapon around 1940s dito sa Pilipinas, ipininta ni Amorsolo ang malulungkot na eksena sa panahon ng giyera. Nakita na marami ng kulay pula at itim sa kanyang mga painting. Ang husay ni Amorsolo ay hindi matatawaran kaya hanggang ngayon ang kanyang painting ay binibigyan ng halaga. Binigyan din tayo ng mga larawan na magpapaalala ng ganda ng ating bansa pati na rin ng ating kasaysayan. Sa mixing video na ito ay sana natutunan natin kung sino nga ba si Amorsolo at bakit mahalaga ang mga painting niya. Check out!
Vicente Manansala was a modern artist who used a semi-abstract style to paint religious subjects and scenes of Philippine urban life. Born in Manila, at age 15, Manansala studied under the painter Ramon Peralta while also working as a sign painter. He entered the University of the Philippines School of Fine Arts in 1926 and graduated in 1930.
Over time, Manansala developed a style called transparent cubism that influenced his fellow neo-realists Cesar Legazpi and Romeo Tabuena. He is credited with helping develop a style that was unique to the Philippines. Ultimately, Manansala's art showed his ability to use Western styles of modernism to tell stories of Philippine life and culture.
As a neo-realist and a member of the 13 Moderns, Manansala was regarded as one of the Philippines' most prominent post-war artists. He held his first one-person show at the Manila Hotel in 1951. Manansala's post-war paintings were influenced by the work of Fernando Amorsolo. His subjects included mothers with children, cockfights, street vendors, and families gathering for meals. After first making sentimental paintings of country people, he soon developed a new set of works that showed the difficulties of city life. One of his works from this period, The Madonna of the Slums, portrays a mother and child living in poverty in a post-war Manila shantytown. While making these representational paintings, he also experimented with abstraction.
Manansala received his formal training at École des Beaux-Arts in Montreal, in the United States, and in France, where he studied with the famous cubist Ferdinand Léger. Upon his return to the Philippines, Manansala worked as an illustrator for the Philippine Herald and a layout artist for Photo News and Saturday Evening News Magazine.
After his death in August of 1981, he was proclaimed a national artist in painting in 1982. Holy Angel University recently opened a wing of its museum called the Vicente Manansala Collection, which features many important works from the artist's estate.
Si Victoria Edades ay kinikilala bilang Father of Modern Philippine Painting at naging National Artist Awardee noong 1976. Pinanak siya sa Dagupan, Pangasinan noong December 23, 1895. Siya ang pinakabata sa 10 magkakapatid kung saan ang 6 ay namatay sa smallpox. Siya ay nag-aral sa mga various schools at pagtungtong ng grade 7 sa kanyang art class, siya ay kinilala bilang apprentice teacher dahil sa kanyang talent. Pagkatapos ng high school, si Edades at ang kanyang mga kaibigan ay nagpunta ng Amerika. Siya ay nag-aral sa University of Washington at kumuha ng architecture at eventually Master of Fine Arts in Painting. Bumalik siya sa Pilipinas noong 1928 bitbit ang diploma mula sa Amerika kasama ang bagong perspektibo sa art. Ang Philippine art scene mula 1920s hanggang World War II ay konserbatibo. Walang mga art galleries or association of artists at ang sining ay isa lamang libangan. Karamihan sa mga artist ay nagtrabaho sa mga kumpanya bilang tagagawa ng signs, logos at taga-ukit ng lapida. Kumpara sa conservative art na gawa ni Fernando Marsolo at Guillermo Tolentino, mas gusto ni Edades ang pagpinta ng mga distorted na human figures na kilala sa West. Siya ay naimpluwensyahan ng mga artist tulad ni Cézanne, Gauguin, Picasso at iba pang mga artist na may iba't ibang style tulad ng Cubism, Dadaism, Surrealism at iba pang art movements na hindi pa kilala noon sa Pilipinas. Nag-exhibit siya ng isang one-man show para ipakilala ang modern art locally. 30 paintings ang nakadisplay kasama ang mga kinilala sa Amerika. Unfortunately, hindi ito tinanggap ng mga kritiko at mga viewers at ni isang painting ay hindi nabili. There were several things that people did not like about my works then. Most obviously was the rough texture, which was just the opposite of Marsolo's smoothness. And then, most of the people I painted except for the portraits were not pretty. People also object to the use of distortion, which they considered ugly. Dahil hindi maganda ang pagtanggap sa kanyang sining, napilitan si Edades na magturo at magtrabaho na lang sa mga opisina. Siya ay minsang naging draftsman sa Bureau of Public Works, tagaguhit sa Metropolitan Theater, at nagturo sa Mapua Institute of Technology. Eventually, siya ay nagturo na rin sa Department of Architecture sa University of Santo Tomas. Naging influence ni Edades ang American curricula sa paggawa ng fine arts curriculum para sa UST, kung saan sinikap niya na ang mga estudyante ay magkaroon ng kaalaman sa art history at maging bukas ang mata sa iba't ibang sining sa labas ng bansa. Ito ay isang malaking hakbang para sa pag-aaral ng sining na dati ay tinuturing na maiksing vocational course. Pumutok ang World War II ay sinara ang UST at ginawang internment camp. Karamihan ng artist ay apolitical o walang kinikilingan, ngunit ang iba sa kanila ay nagtrabaho para kumita. Isa na rito si Edades at iba pang prominenteng artist na naging member ng Kalibapi o isang Japanese organization. Sila ay nakasuhan na sumanib sa mga Hapon. Hinuli sila at ikinulong sa Old Bilibid Prison, Sampaloc, Maynila. Nang matapos ang gera, bumalik si Edades sa UST. Noong 1948, ibang battleground ang nasaksihan ng Philippine art scene at press nang nagtapat ang conservative at modern art sa unang art competition ng Art Association of the Philippines. Lahat ng nanalo ay mga modernist at nagkaroon ng debate between Edades na modernist at Guillermo Tolentino na conservative na parehong tinitingala sa mundo ng sining. Sa edad na 70 years old noong 1966 ay nag-retire si Edades sa pagtuturo sa UST. After 10 years, siya ay ginawaran ng National Artist Award.
Fabian de la Rosa was a Philippine artist who was educated in Europe and went on to create elegant portraits and masterfully painted scenes of Philippine life. Artist Fabian Cueto de la Rosa The artist's wife, Gorgonio, died of cancer, and he was left living alone, suffering from kidney disease. Fabian de la Rosa died on December 15, 1938, in his Manila apartment.
Si Jose Villones Blanco na kilala rin sa palayaw na Pitok ay isang muralist na tinitingala bilang Master of Philippine Genre dahil sa kanyang malikhaing pagbibigay buhay sa mga pangkaraniwang tanawin, gawain at tradisyong Pilipino sa kanyang mga higanting canvas. Isinilang sa Angono, Rizal noong ika-19 ng Marso 1932, nagtapos siya ng Fine Arts mula sa Universidad ng Santo Tomas noong 1955 kung saan nakamit din niya ang unang gantimpala para sa kanyang graduation thesis. Ilan sa mga naging professor niya sa UST ay ang mga maestrong sina Victorio Idades, Vicente Manansala, Potong Francisco, Galo Ocampo, Antonio Llamas at Diosdado Lorenzo. Taong 1961 nang ikasal siya kay Loreto Perez at sila ay nabiyayaan ng 7 anak na lahat ay may talento sa sining. Tinaglaon, nakilala ang pamilya Blanco bilang angkan ng mga mahuhusay na pintor na nagkaroon ng family exhibit sa National Museum of the Philippines noong 1978. Dinagsa rin ng mga tao ang kanilang Blanco Family Museum na itinayo noong 1980. Nakilala si Jose Blanco para sa kanyang estilong folk realism na puno ng detalye at buhay na buhay ang mga kulay. Sumikat din siya para sa kanyang mga murals tulad ng Angono Town Fiesta, isang higanting canvas na nagtataglay ng mahigit sa 100 figura ng tao. Karamihan sa kanyang mga paksa ang nakatuon sa Angono tulad ng pag-ahon ng pagoda na kinomisyon ng Rockefeller Foundation of New York noong dekada 70. Ilan sa pinakatanyag na obra ni Blanco ay ang Risen Christ sa Holy Cross Parish ng Valenzuela, ang kanyang series of Philippine Fiestas ng Moriones, Kaniao, Angono Fiesta, Ati-Atihan at Lukban Pahiyas, Kaingin Harvest, Basket Weaver, at ang History of Medicine sa PGH. Nagkaroon din si Blanco ng maraming solo at family exhibit sa loob at labas ng Pilipinas. Ang kanyang coffee table book na Blanco ay inilathala naman noong 1987 sa panulat ng premyadong art critic na si Alice Guillermo. Pumanaw siya mula sa sakit sa puso noong ika-14 ng Agosto 2008 sa edad na 76. Sumasaludo ang Art to Art sa alaala ng dakilang pintor na si Jose Pitok Blanco.
Currently, one of the artists we are featuring is Manuel Valdemar. He is known as a traveler artist. He is best known for his visual diaries, which is he paints his experiences, known tourist destinations all over the world, and he paints them through a Filipino artist's perception.
I was born and raised in Laguna, in Paite, Laguna, home of wood carvings and wood carvers. Yun ang una kong naging trabaho. Nagpe-paint ako ng paper mache, nag-carve ako, then saka ako nagpinta. As a folk artist, nag-aral ako sa UST. So yung folk, naging fine art instead of folk art. But kasama pa rin ng aking estilo, yung kulay at saka yung message. Parang I would say folk artist pa rin ako o rural painter. So my colors talaga is fiesta. Masaya, wala akong galit, walang ahas, walang ganon, walang protesta. Basta masaya, and that's Pinoy. I had a double life. Pumapasok ako sa opisina and after 5, libre na ako sa sarili kong images yung trabaho. No? So hindi ako nakakapagkulay kasi sa gabi. Most of my sa gabi is just black and white, pen and ink. Anyway, nang sumali ako sa contest, of course, lahat yan kulay kasi color sells. Ano? Parang dark horse ako na. Yung sa akin, black and white na, plywood size pa, pen and ink pa. Naging grand prize ako noon. That was 1972. So napansin ng UNICEF yung aking mga painting, kulay Pasko. So for 18 years, nagagamit yung iba-iba kong painting ko. Around the world, pinipili nila kung ano yung magpipit sa Christmas, sa gano'n, together with international artists. So once I had an exhibition abroad and they introduced me as a UNICEF artist, parang yun na naging passport ko eh. Parang you had a following already because hindi naman lahat kinukuha ng UNICEF na. Hindi, mamimili sila eh. Since then, nag-ano pa rin ako. Every weekends, nagka-carve pa rin ako sa Paite. Up to now, I do a lot of wood carvings. Yun ang aking parang physical exercise instead of mag-workout. Kasi I have 500 sculptures. So, ang ano ko is yung roots nung pinuntahan ko, yung pinanggalingan ko, pinipaint ko yun. Tapos ini-exhibit ko rito. So, anong nangyari? Pag nag-exhibit ako sa abroad, local team sa Philippine motifs, pagbalik ko, foreign scenes yung inilalabas ko. So, nagkameron ako ng parang bridge of both cultures. Laging tanong, kailan ka ba magiging national artist? Kailan ka ba gano'n? Dadami na accomplishment. No? Sabi ko, hindi naman ako ang papaboran yan eh. Yung mga collector din eh. Even myself, I can't afford my own painting eh. But of course, kailangan laging may bago kang inilalabas. I mean, you have to open your eyes, mind, and everything. Hindi basta paulit-ulit lang yung ginagawa mo.
Hey everybody! In this video, we're going to talk about complementary colors. So, complementary colors are colors that are across from one another on the color wheel. So those would be things like blue and orange, yellow and violet, and red and green. So those colors sit across from one another on the color wheel, meaning they're kind of opposites in hue. So we're going to start by just making our complementary color pairs, and then we will mix them together to see what happens. So why don't we start with blue and orange? So as you can see on my palette here, I have the 3 primary colors. So I'm going to create orange right now to get started. So I'm just going to mix my red and yellow until I get to a good orange. All right, that seems good to me. So I'm going to put my orange over here. Just make a little swatch. And to save me time and paint, I'm going to just use a separate brush for my blue. All right. So I'll put my blue over here. All right, so here's a complementary pair, blue and orange. Now, what's interesting about complementary colors is they're opposites, and when we put them next to one another, they kind of create this visual vibration because they're so different. So when they're next to each other, they get more intense when they're next to each other. And that's why so often sports teams use complementary colors, such as the Broncos, right? Because they're vibrant and they stick out. And it like makes them kind of be seen on the field. So that's what happens when they're next to each other. But when we mix them together, that's where interesting changes occur. So what happens when we mix them together is essentially you're mixing all three primaries together. And when all three primaries get mixed together, it creates something known as a neutral. And so if we mix them all kind of equally, we get a neutralized color. However, what is really beneficial with complementary colors is maybe you have a really intense color, such as this orange, and you want to tone it down just a little bit. So you're like, I think that, this orange is a little too vibrant, and I want more of like a nice fall color sort of orange. What we would do there is then just put a tiny little bit of its complement into the orange, and we'll mix it together. And so this starts the process of neutralizing the color because we're adding its opposite to it. So I end up with my orange kind of toned down a little bit. And the same goes for if I need to tone down my blue, I can add a little bit of its complement right here. Then what happens when we have a half and half mixture, we end up getting kind of the pure neutral, which ends up being sort of a brownish grayish color most of the time, just depending on the primaries that you're using in the middle. So this would be a progression of complementary colors from blue to orange. Now let's try it with a different complementary pair. This time we'll do violet and yellow. So I'm going to mix up my violet. All right, so we will start with our violet over here, and then a swatch of yellow over here. All right, so same principles apply here. If you want to tone down your yellow, you would add just a tiny little splotch of the violet. So now we get this kind of nice golden yellow by adding a little bit of violet to it. Then same goes for our violet. If we need to take that down a notch, we're going to just add in a hint of yellow to it. And then for in the middle, we will mix them about half and half. So we get that neutral sort of brownish gray hue in the middle. And then we have our last pair, which is red and green. So let's mix up those colors next. Okay, so we'll add green over here. And we will take a little swatch of red on the other side. All right, so we have these two very vibrant hues that are combating each other for dominance. So let's do our mixtures. So the red and green complementary color scheme is very much what we see as the leaves start to change in autumn, as the chlorophyll kind of wears out in the leaves. They become more red, so we start to see the red entering the green, and that's what makes them turn those nice dark hues. Also, if you ever need a maroon, add a little tish of green to your red, and that tones it down very nicely. So as your leaves get older, they turn brown, right? And that is why it happens, because the red starts entering the green, making that nice mixture in the middle. I kind of want a more subtle transition here over on the red side, so I'm going to redo this one. There we go. That's very nice. All right, so that is a little bit about complementary colors and how we mix them to create neutralized hues.